Welcome to the Sports 2.0 show. I'm Cierra Clark alongside Grant Mitchell and Jaya Williams. Make sure to subscribe to the Sports 2.0 network on YouTube for the latest content. It is NBA time, and we're going to be talking about the conference semifinals, some of the games that happened on Sunday, as well as the games tonight. We're going to start with the Nets and the Bucks. The Bucks even the series 107-96, but we got to talk about the elephant in the room. Kyrie Irving went down with an ankle injury. He made a layup and he fell down, and head coach Steve Nash did say that he will be out for Game 5. So let's start with Grant. Can the Nets even come back from this?
So this is an interesting scenario because for one of the first times, maybe even the first time, we're seeing Kevin Durant in a position where he has to be the solo show for his team. Obviously, we saw him back when he was with Oklahoma City when Russell Westbrook got taken out by Patrick Beverley. But this is the first time where there's really pressure and expectations on his shoulders. Now, when Kyrie Irving went down, he only shot 6 for 19 from the field. PJ Tucker did a great job defensively on him. I believe Durant was 3 for 12 with Tucker as the primary defender. So obviously there are going to be adjustments. They're going to find ways to give Durant more open looks, or if he gets doubled, find ways for him to be a productive facilitator. But one thing for sure, without Kyrie Irving and without James Harden, who was their leading assist man, they are really lacking in individual playmaking. And now the question, of course, becomes, do you move Jeff Green into the starting lineup and play without a point guard? Or do you bring in Mike James, who only signed with the team a month and a couple of days ago? But that remains to be seen. But the Nets are much different looking than what we expected them to, and they're a lot different than the team people thought would be shoo-ins for the championship.
That's right. That three-headed horseman of James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant is now all down to one right now. Jaya, how do you think that the Nets can come back from this?
Now, here's the thing. If you ask me, if the Nets don't win Game 5, this series is basically over. I don't believe they're going to be able to win Game 6 in Milwaukee if they cannot win this Game 5. So that's really what it comes down to. Now, what everyone's been debating is, can KD do this alone? In a single game, I do think Kevin Durant can win this on his own. He has the skill set. He has the caliber of talent to win against the Bucks. But if we're talking about winning the entire series, I think they're definitely going to need some more support than just Durant. But for Game 5 alone, it's possible. I think he can do it, but it's not going to be an easy task at all. If I were the Bucks, I would load all of my defense on Durant, which is what I presume that they're going to do.
All right, and let's switch over to the West Coast. The semifinal for the West is set, not set in stone completely, but almost set, with the Phoenix Suns defeating the Denver Nuggets 125-118. Chris Paul added 37 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, as well as Devin Booker and his 34 points. The Suns swept a team in the playoffs into a final for the first time in over a decade. What is cooking for the Suns right now?
Well, you have to bring up the backcourt of Devin Booker and Chris Paul. And really with DeAndre Ayton in that pick and roll, it's a nightmare. Because if you hedge the screen, then you give Chris Paul a free lane into the mid-range, and he just might be the best mid-range shooter ever. And if you go under, he can either pull the three, or if he can hit DeAndre Ayton for a lob, or you usually have Devin Booker curling off of the screen on the wing. So there's really no way to defend them. You just have to pick your poison. But, sometimes pick your poison means force them into the shot with the lowest odds of going in. In this situation, they're all really high-quality looks. And, of course, if we're going to talk about how they closed it out, Chris Paul, 37 points in Game 4, the final game. That's the most points he's scored since May of 2018, which was his first season with the Rockets. So not only is that 3 teams ago, that's 3 years ago, which puts in perspective just how historic of a performance this was for him. Now, we know that this is only Chris Paul's second time getting to the conference finals. The first time he went was a couple of years ago when the Rockets lost to the Warriors in 7 games. And a lot of people are saying that his legacy depends on the outcome of this game, or this series, I don't know if I entirely agree that if he loses, it hurts his legacy. But if he can finally make a finals for the first time, it definitely cements him as within that top 5, and this is way in the future. But if he does win a championship, that's been his biggest criticism, that he doesn't have one. So then you're immediately putting him up there with Steph Curry and Magic Johnson in the top 3, at least in my opinion.
And he's 36 years old, which is showing that sometimes it takes time in order to achieve whatever goal you have in mind. Jaya, what is clicking for the Phoenix Suns in your opinion?
I think everything Grant said is completely true. The dynamic of this team just works. You can see their chemistry just in the way they play. I think Monty Williams really knows how to develop his talent. You know, Devin Booker played great. Same with Bridges. Same with DeAndre Ayton. And then you add in CP3 and Crowder. They all work together and know how to use their strengths to their advantage. I think the Suns know how to play with intellect, and Booker and Paul have been displaying excellent leadership in guard play. So I think that everything's really just working in their favor.
All right, let's move over to tonight's games. Let's start with the Philadelphia 76ers. They lead 2-1 over the Atlanta Hawks. On Friday, the Sixers defeated the Hawks 127-111 in Game 3. They were led by Joel Embiid, 27 points, 5 other players also in double figures. It's a home game in Atlanta. How can Trae Young and the Hawks hold off the 76ers?
Well, it's funny that we're talking about this here, because this morning on Parlay Power Hour, I actually took the Hawks on the money line in this game, even though the 76ers, at least this morning, they were 3-point favorites. I don't know if that's changed since then. But I think the Hawks get this done. The 76ers thought that they had Trae Young figured out by switching Ben Simmons onto him, but we saw Nate McMillan respond with different ways of getting Trae Young open. And even though they lost the Game 3 to the 76ers and Philly's now up 2-1, Trae Young had a game-high 28 points, and Danny Green went down 4 minutes into the game with a strained calf. He's not going to be available for 2 to 3 weeks, which means one of Trae Young's primary defenders is your second most valuable player. So if for whatever reason he gets in foul trouble, you have to take him off of him. And then your other primary defender, Danny Green, isn't playing. So I think Trae Young either scores a ton tonight or he assists a ton tonight, depending on how the 76ers play him. So I think it's actually relatively likely the Hawks can take this game. And they're one of those, one of the common cliches is saying that young teams don't know how to win. They also don't know how to lose. You saw Ja Morant every time his team had their back against the wall against the Utah Jazz in the first round, he would explode. Him and Dylan Brooks, Grayson Allen even, they never gave up. And the Hawks are the same way. They went right into New York and got rid of the Knicks in 5 games as the underdog. They took Game 1 off Philly, who's the top seed, in their home arena in the first game of this series. So I think the Hawks go in there and they make a statement tonight and they win.
Jaya, do you think that the Hawks can tie this series up in Game 4?
I do think that they can do it. Young knows how to put up points for the Hawks, and he's been doing a lot of things right on the offensive end. So if he keeps that up, I think the Hawks should be in decent shape. He knows how to make plays. He knows how to react, even with Simmons guarding him. And I think that one of Young's biggest strengths is that he really knows where to find opportunities and create opportunities. So if he continues to do that, he should be in good shape. Joel Embiid's partially torn meniscus is also working in their favor, since I feel the Hawks didn't really have much of an answer for him in the beginning. They just still need to figure out how to combat Ben Simmons, since Simmons was very aggressive in that last timeout of Game 4 on the offensive end, and he knew how to make things more difficult for Trae Young. So if Young is looking out for that, I think he can step up to the plate and take the Hawks to victory.
One more thing I do want to throw in here. Ever since the Atlanta Hawks fired Lloyd Pierce and brought in Nate McMillan as the interim head coach, they went 27-11 to close the season, and they were one of the best scoring teams in basketball. So I think with all the shooters they have, and like I mentioned, the young talent that's very bullheaded and does not want to accept defeat, I just think they have a really good chance tonight. And then, of course, going back to Philly, I would probably favor the Sixers to defend their home court, maybe even win Game 6 in Atlanta. But I like the Hawks tonight.
I agree. I think the Hawks have a great chance.
All right, so we're all going with the Hawks here. Let's go over to the West. On Saturday, the Clippers defeated the Utah Jazz 132-106. Donovan Mitchell did exit the game with an injury. However, he does say that he's ready for Game 4. The Jazz do lead the Clippers 2-1 in this series. But how can the Jazz stop the Clippers from creeping up? Grant, start with you.
Yeah, the Clippers played a phenomenal game in Game 3 of that series to bring it back to 2-1, their first game back at home, where we saw them struggle against the Dallas Mavericks. They lost 3 games of the 4 at home in that series. So this was a really big win for them. They scored 132 points, which I believe was the most they've scored in this postseason. Kawhi Leonard, 34 points. Paul George, 31 points. That second one is especially important because we've heard all the jokes about pandemic P, playoff P, and he did not look too great in those first 2 games. First game was bad, and the second one was even worse. So this was huge for him to get back on the right side of things. But how do the Jazz stop the Clippers from tying it up? Just keep doing what they're doing, in all honesty. They were the best team in the West. They were the best team in basketball, if you go by the regular season record. And they've been the better team in this series. So I think the Jazz have a really good chance here. Now, if Donovan Mitchell is more injured than he's letting on, obviously that's cause for concern, especially with Mike Conley being out. He's really their lone playmaker at guard outside of Jordan Clarkson, who features off the bench. But if Donovan Mitchell is even 80% of himself, he can still give his team an easy 25. And he hits those big shots. Even though he's only in his 3rd year in the league, he's known for a lot of clutch shot making. So as long as the game is close, I think the Jazz can pull it out. And they're actually 5-point underdogs tonight, which I think if they're reading that will fuel them even more because they know that they're in a small market. Obviously, there are all the jokes with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert getting picked last during the All-Star game. LeBron specifically said nobody plays with Utah, nobody cares about them. So if they're seeing that they're underdogs tonight, I just think they have a huge chip on their shoulder, and I think the Jazz can pull it out.
Sometimes pressure can make people play a lot harder. Jaya, how can the Jazz stop the Clippers?
I think going off of what Grant said, them being the underdog in this situation can really work to their advantage. I think the Jazz can bounce back in this game. They're efficient on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively, and if they continue to shoot the ball well and elevate just a little bit more on that defensive side, I think they can stop the Clippers. The team has good chemistry, and I think that they'll be in good shape. Now, my one concern, like Grant brought up, is Donovan Mitchell's health. Will he be able to play just as effectively? I mean, obviously, we don't know how injured he really is, but if he is in good shape, then I think it won't be a problem for them. You know, he has the 3rd highest career average for scoring in the playoffs. He's getting past defenders on the pick and roll, isolation, knocking down the 3. It's all very easy for Mitchell at this point, and he's been cooking and off since his rookie season when he sent Russ and OKC home. So I think he's definitely stepped up in these playoffs. If you look at his stats, and his talent is undeniable. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in this game, but I have my faith in the Jazz.
And one more thing about Donovan Mitchell, it's fair to say that he's been one of the 2 or 3 best performers in the playoffs, but I think even though he's young and he's in Utah, which again is a small market, I think it's totally fair to say he's one of the 10 best players in the NBA because he is phenomenal. And obviously he missed that stretch late in the regular season, which, some people forgot about him. It lowered his stock somewhat. But he has been amazing. And if I were to start a team with one of the younger players in the league, it's between him and Luka, and I don't know who I would take. I think he is sensational.
I agree.
It's going to be definitely a fun one to watch tonight at 10 o'clock. We'll move over to some betting lines over here. We'll start with the 76ers taking on the Hawks, provided by FanDuel. These lines, the 76ers, I'll go first, actually. I have the Atlanta Hawks at +3. I think that with Embiid still questionable, his performance might be limited a little bit. And I also think Trae Young and the Hawks will definitely challenge them at home. I have the money line at -48 with the 76ers. And then I'm actually taking the under, like with Embiid out or quite limited. I think that the 76ers won't play him as much or might limit him a little bit more just so he might not hurt himself down the stretch, because I think they have that confidence that they can take the series. So I think that they're kind of maybe limit him a little bit, maybe use Simmons more, just to not aggravate his injury in his knee. So I think that the scoring might not be as high. So I'm going to take the under for this one. What do you guys have?
So as I mentioned earlier, I'm on the show Parlay Power Hour in the mornings with hosted by Tanner Kern and Will Reed. And we talked about this game. It was actually my bet to take the Hawks on the money line. I'm not too sure which way this game could go on the over-under, to be completely honest with you. These two teams have scored a ton of points in the playoffs thus far. They were both in the top half of scoring in the regular season. I already mentioned Nate McMillan turned the Hawks into one of the maybe the best, if I remember correctly, scoring team during his tenure in Atlanta. So it could very well go over. But if Joel Embiid is out, the Hawks are prone to have an off shooting night. Trae Young is great at those long-distance threes, but his average is not that great. I believe he shoots 34% for the season and a career. So it's definitely possible it could go either way. And back to Joel Embiid's health. On one hand, him going out could very well hurt the team. And on the other hand, it could very well help them. We saw Ben Simmons scored 42 points against Rudy Gobert, the Defensive Player of the Year, and the Utah Jazz, the best team in basketball, when Embiid didn't play in a game earlier this season. So to be completely honest, I'm shying away from the over-under here, but I'm taking the Hawks on the money line and to cover.
And Jaya, for you, what are your predictions on this game?
I'm also with you guys. I'm taking the Hawks on the money line. I'm taking them for +3. I think that they're going to be able to put up those points and play well offensively. Again, I was also debating with the over-under, but I think if I had to choose, I would go with the under because, like you said, I think with Simmons, there's just going to be less points that are put up, but it really could go either way.
All right. And then we'll switch over to the Jazz taking on the Clippers. I actually have the Clippers on this one, -5.5. And I have the Clippers also on the money line, and I have the under with this one. I don't think that Mitchell will be ready for this game. I know he says he is, but I'm not. I don't think that the Jazz wants to risk him getting hurt a little bit more. So I think they might limit him as well. Also with Mike Conley still questionable, I don't think there's going to be a ton of production there in regards to points. Also with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, they both combined for over 60 points in the last game. I think that so that's why I think the Clippers will take this one. However, I do think the Jazz will try to step up defensively in this one. So I'm going to take the under, and I'm going to take the Clips all the way.
I'm going to have to disagree with you here. I like some of the things you had to say. Mitchell's health, obviously the biggest question mark. But we saw Utah sat him in game 1 in the first round against the Memphis Grizzlies, and he was reportedly furious with the organization. So if he says he wants to go and he can go, I think they'll at least let him try. Hopefully if he shows that he's not 100%, they'll pull him before another re-aggravation actually happens. But I expect him to be out there. And to be honest, even if he's not, I'm not sure it matters because the Jazz made more threes than any other team in basketball, and the Clippers shot a higher three-point percentage than any other team in NBA history this season. So I think, though, I'm hammering the over here. Again, I'm sorry to disagree with you, but I think this is going to be a ton of points. We've seen that the Clippers obviously scored 132 in their last game. Jazz have already scored 120 in a few games this postseason. They would have covered the over 2 out of 3 games this series. And in the 2 games that they covered, it would have been way over, whereas the one game the under would have hit, they were only 5 points off. So if you look at the numbers, plus just the recent history and the trends, I'm taking the over here. And like I said earlier, I'm taking the Jazz to win the game. So especially as +5, definitely taking Utah here.
I agree with Grant. I'm going to have to say over as well, just because there's so many powerhouse scorers on both teams, and I think that we're going to see a lot of points come up on this game. And I said earlier as well that I'm going to go +5 with the Jazz, I think Donovan Mitchell's really going to be able to lead this team to victory. And the team just knows how to, if they elevate on the defensive side and continue to move the ball effectively, I think it's going to be a great win for the Jazz tonight.
All right. Sounds like some really fun picks and things to keep up with. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on the Sports 2.0 show. Make sure to subscribe to the Sports 2.0 network on YouTube, and we're on Twitch as well. First, I'm Cierra Clark, and with Grant Williams Jaya Williams and Grant. Last name, sorry.
Grant Mitchell.
Grant Mitchell. Have a nice night.